And that is why I became a patrol officer in my late 30s. And I was running around the track at 37 years old with a bunch of 21-year-olds. And
was this when you got jacked? Was that was? Well, welcome to the very first episode of Live, Laugh, Lawsuit. Today I have Brett Rawson from Nelson. Is it Nelson and Jones or Nelson
just
Jones?
Nelson Jones.
Just Nelson Jones.
Nelson Jones.
Just
is
like
the
the
law
no
firm.
T at the end of Brett. There's no and in Nelson and Jones. It's
That
Nelson
is correct.
Jones.
You got
He's
it.
all about efficiency and saving time. I love it.
One of my many skills. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for joining us and being our guinea pig on our very first one.
Happy to be here.
I got really bad ADHD, so I'll make sure I stick to the cue cards.
Yeah.
So tell us about your firm. You teased me a little bit before we did the show that you've got some interesting ways that you run the firm.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, the firm has really been an interesting evolution. The firm started with an idea, as many businesses do, but one of the things I was critically interested in my career was law enforcement. And we have always represented police officers. And at the ripe old age of 30-something years old, I went to police academy after I was already an attorney.
Oh.
And so became a police officer, eventually became general counsel for the Utah Fraternal Order of Police. And we now represent thousands and thousands of Utah police officers.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got to ask, what do you think about what's going on in LA right now?
Very sad, very concerned about the community, about the people who have been affected by the fires. Very concerned with some of the decisions that were made leading up to the fire.
Yeah.
And there are folks, unfortunately, they're going to have to be held responsible.
Yeah.
So, but back to the firm, I mean, law enforcement has been our mission for many, many years. And even though we're here to talk a little bit about the personal injury work that we do as attorneys, it was the representation of cops that led us towards a number of different practice areas, including personal injury. Yeah. And so we were joking before we came on that we're an overnight success. I think 14 years in overnight, here we are with billboards on the freeway. But it didn't start that way. It started literally with the representation of officers.
Yeah. And side note, I got to ask because the billboards really did pop up. And I know you've been grinding for years, but you guys started going really hard. One question is, do people recognize you when they see you now? Like, have you been at the grocery store and people are like, I saw your billboard?
Every once in a while. Thankfully, I'm hiding behind this beard, which helps a little bit. But, certainly the people that already know me are seeing it, and they're a little bit surprised because, let's face it, the billboard marketing is a little gutsy, and you're putting yourself out there in a way that some people are not comfortable. My name is not even on the firm, so people are sometimes surprised that here we have Nelson Jones. I'm not Nelson or Jones. Those were originally employees of mine, but we love their name. And so my background is marketing. We wanted a name that really rang true with people as if they'd heard about it all their lives.
Yeah.
And so as people are recognizing me, they're really wondering for the first time, well, wait a minute, is that your firm or is that somebody else?
Yeah.
Because my name's Brett Rawson.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's awesome. It's kind of a humble decision to do that. I know.
Well, it's humble maybe, or just maybe, an aversion to having to deal with complaints. I mean, at some
You're
point,
like, talk to Jones,
yeah,
talk to
I'm
Nelson.
not either one of those guys. Talk to the owners. You know what I mean?
I like it.
But
it's a barrier for Karens. I like it.
From your mouth to the Almighty. Yeah, let's keep me away from that. But honestly, it has been, you talk about humbling. It's humbling to hear from people we've helped over the years, to have police officers or other clients who will contact me in a text usually and say, hey, I saw your billboard. I'm so glad you guys are, doing that and thanking me for perhaps something that happened years ago.
That's awesome. Tell me about, because that's not the typical audience that a personal injury firm is dealing with.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's got to be humbling. I'm sure you have really touching stories. That's, I would imagine, an underserved and maybe under fought for community.
Yeah, and we were, granted, we were involved in law enforcement before, let's say, before the world changed, and really in the course of my career, which spans a couple decades now as an attorney, it has changed a lot, and the perception of law enforcement in some quarters has certainly changed, and so we saw that evolution, and not all of that evolution was positive. However, for a law firm that deals in problems, I mean, and frankly, that's what we do. We solve problems. The timing was excellent from a business perspective to get involved in the representation of officers. And so as we go out on officer-involved critical incidents or get involved in internal affairs, really what we're doing is creating relationships with people that are the people in our communities. I mean, let's face it, the police officers that we represent are our neighbors, the people we see at church or at the store. They are folks with families. And, if you add up the people connected to you in Utah law enforcement, you're talking about perhaps hundreds of thousands of people. So as a personal injury attorney, the greatest success we've had recently is as we've reached out to the general public, which has been our goal and design with some of the outdoor advertising, was that so many of our law enforcement clients, thousands of them, are now becoming aware of the other things that we do. So when I joke about an overnight success, it's an overnight success almost 20 years in the making.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
How has, and this might be a random question, but has the rise of the internet, I get on TikTok, I get on Instagram, and you see those, I'm filming you, by the way, when an officer pulls over.
Sure.
And it's just this angsty,
Yeah.
white-knuckled situation. And then there's body cam footage. And is that what's kind of been the change in law enforcement, personal injury?
That's part of it. Certainly, and even as a police officer on the street, I've encountered some of that earlier in my career. But for better or worse, I got out of the daily grind of patrol work at a time when body cams were just coming online as sort of the standard. And even though there were people, passersby, that were willing to pull out their cell phones and record, we weren't seeing the constitutional auditors back when I was on the street. That is a relatively new phenomenon, and I got to admit to you, even though I'm a former police officer and I love my clients and I represent them, with as much passion as I can muster. I do get a kick out of some of these YouTube or TikTok auditors, and my compulsion is, I wish I could contact these police officers and say, all right, good try, but next time this happens, perhaps think about the following.
Yeah.
And to maybe coach them on the law a little bit.
Yeah. I love the ones where it's the citizen and they pull out some Section C, Addendum
Sure.
D in such and such.
Right.
Do you see those videos? Are they often correct?
I do. I would say that there are as many that are incorrect as there are correct.
Yeah.
And some of that is just, the confidence factor of the auditor and whether or not they've, got the right law or not.
Yeah.
But the reality is there is a need for ongoing education among law enforcement officers. And part of that is an understanding of constitutional law.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and I imagine it's hard for the officer when they get that thrown at them and they don't have every book memorized and every law memorized.
Lawyers don't.
Yeah.
Lawyers, I mean, that's why the favorite thing that lawyers say is it depends. And that usually is code for, I got to go get in the research and come back to you on that.
I love it. I'm going to use that with my wife. I like that. Okay. That's a good lawyer trick I can use on my family.
I mean, and the reality is it does depend on so many factors. Everything is fact specific. The application of law to, a certain set of facts is always important. But police officers have a very, very difficult job. They're asked to be therapists and locksmiths and warriors and teachers all in the same shift, and then they come home and they're expected to act normal at home, and that's a difficult thing sometimes.
Yeah.
So
all while fighting public perception that they're awful.
Yeah,
when
and
they're really just probably serving more than they are ever bothering anybody, I'd imagine.
99.9% of officers are doing the right things for the right reasons. The American professional law enforcement officer is that a professional.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, with the media and frankly, everybody with an iPhone is a journalist nowadays. What makes it to TikTok is sometimes not our finest example,
Yeah.
and anybody is entitled to a bad day. But I'm very proud of that average officer on the street just trying to survive their shift and make a difference for the right reasons.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears quite a bit.
Sure.
You mentioned you also have marketing in the background or
Yeah,
in your background.
I do.
Tell me about going back to it's an overnight success. Obviously,
Yeah.
all these billboards pop up, but
Mm,
I imagine there's years of building intake processes
sure.
and the flow of customers and taking care of customers. What has that looked like? Kind of putting you guys your firm out there for everyone to see. What are some of those processes you've put in place?
That's a really interesting question because there was a time when all of our, or the majority of our marketing was word of mouth. Even though we have some folks with some deep marketing background, myself included, I went to a little obscure school called BYU here in Utah County. You may have heard. Have you heard of it? It's,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I've heard of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives
Yeah.
and soda shops, but
Sure, So anyway, yeah, you could Google it, but anyway, did quite a bit at the university before I went off and started a career, and most of that was in marketing communications, and so I
okay,
had a background that I knew eventually would become more important for the work that we were doing in the firm. Years ago, I read a book called Guerrilla Marketing. I don't know if you remember that one, but
yeah,
the premise of the book was essentially become your best client, whatever that is. Just entrench yourself, weave the fabric of that ideal client into your own life. And that was what I had in mind when I ultimately went to police academy. And so marketing in the beginning was becoming my best client, which at that time was law enforcement. And that is why I became a patrol officer in my late 30s and did it for a number of years. But as we have more increasingly reached out to the general public, the need for conventional marketing and marketing that has grown with the advent of technologies became more and more important. Understanding those technologies, certainly the internet and SEO and all the different ways you might market electronically. But then, as everybody's talking about now, artificial intelligence and the many tools that there are with AI, that has become increasingly important, as has the expectation of clients who are used to interfacing with a number of different types of products or services and are wondering, well, why wouldn't my law firm be any different? I want to access information from my law firm the same way I might with Amazon or, DoorDash,
yeah, yeah.
for example.
Yeah, exactly. I
So,
mean, you set me up perfectly. So that's the premise behind the Hono. We call it sometimes the pizza tracker for
yeah,
legal cases. So
sure.
you can see each phase of the case and have that same visibility as you would when you order a package or order a
Right.
pizza. I love that. One thing I wanted to ask, not every lawyer's had the luxury of having the background that they need. Does it often happen that you've seen lawyers get out of passing the bar, becoming a lawyer, and then they're like, oh, I have to also be a marketer and client success, and I have to implement technologies. You have to wear a lot of hats to run a personal injury firm, especially in the beginning.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because I would say, in a generalized way, the average lawyer getting out of law school is ill-equipped as a marketer, even as a business person. And if you're going to go into the business of law, you're absolutely right. You have to be at least aware of the things that you don't know. And I don't pretend to know everything about marketing. There are certainly things technologically that I don't particularly understand, but I surround myself with people that are brighter and smarter than I am in those areas that are impactful for especially technology. But as far as lawyers go, they're trained on the practice of law. and that is a very different thing than to be trained on marketing or sales.
Yeah. It's almost like, okay, I've learned to bake. Now I'm going to go open a bakery, and it's like, oh, well, now I've got to be an entrepreneur. I've got to be the manager of this. I got to know operations. There's a lot.
Well, and especially if you have the type of firm that we do, where you're dealing with, frankly, what can become large numbers of people. How do you communicate effectively with those people? How do you organize cases, and not just the cases, but the steady stream of information that needs to go between an attorney and their client to give that client the peace and confidence that they need to just endure what is oftentimes a very difficult part of their lives.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said, that you started out by word of mouth, and the way you get word of mouth is by taking care of your clients.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, they're not going to say anything good about you.
Right.
How would you? What are some of the practices you implemented to make sure that they became advocates for you?
Even before you have a discussion about technology and the ways that might facilitate what you're talking about, you have to have a healthy degree of empathy to want to create a relationship of trust with a client. Now, that comes with a two-edged sword, because, and especially with younger attorneys, I have to tell young attorneys sometimes, listen, these problems are your client's problems. Don't internalize this to the point where it's affecting your personal life. You didn't get charged with a crime. You're not losing your family. You're not losing your business. You didn't get injured. And separate that in your mind while still showing the appropriate degree of empathy to where people feel genuinely cared about. And if you can start from that place, then things are going to go well for you as an attorney.
I like that. Is there almost a spectrum that you kind of land on, where it's so much empathy that you kind of take it home, or it's not enough where it kind of becomes transactional? Because I know it's all about cases. You guys don't work on hourly, it's contingency.
Right.
So you kind of run the risk of it being transactional, but then I like what you're saying, where you kind of have to keep the empathy in check.
You do. I think it's similar in some ways to the medical profession. If you think about doctors or surgeons who are having to deal with, terrible health problems, and, it would be very easy to bring that home and to dwell on those things, but that takes away from the effectiveness as a professional. And so it's important to care, but it's also important as a professional to keep a perspective that you're only as good as, the next task you have as a professional attorney.
Wow. It's almost like the best way to show empathy is by being the best professional and the best lawyer that you can be.
I think so. Absolutely.
I love that. My wife is an ultrasound tech at Primary Children's.
Oh, wow.
She comes home. How was your day? Oh, I made a silly little TikTok.
Sure.
How was your day? Oh, I found cancer. This family's grieving. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
We have very different lives, and sometimes it's hard. She'll think about it all night, and it's hard to compartmentalize if you care for people. How do you take that and not bring it home?
It is hard, but it's also important. You do need to care about your clients, and we do. And one of the things we've set out to do at Nelson Jones, which I think has been critical to our success, is to ensure we don't lose sight of really the small firm, boutique firm mentality, which is that every single client matters. You will be able to talk to an attorney, and you will be on first name bases, and you can contact that attorney anytime you want. And I think that has gone a long way to make us what we are today.
I love that. I'm almost getting the impression that you can implement all these processes and these technologies to help clients, and that's important. But at the end of the day, if you don't care about the client, it's going to show.
It's going to show. People know. Yeah. People know when you're sitting, as close as I'm sitting to you right now, but talking about maybe horrific injuries, catastrophic injuries that are going to potentially affect that person for the rest of their lives. They're going to know if you care enough to help them, or if you're just talking the talk but not walking the walk.
Yeah. So why get into personal injury? You've had these other backgrounds.
Sure.
What kind of sparked that?
Well, to be clear, we've always been in personal injury. It's hard to represent a law enforcement officer and not at least have a certain number of those types of cases coming through the door, even though these folks are doing their jobs. And if they get injured, they have workers' comp, which is the remedy as it relates to their employer. Oftentimes, there's a third party involved, and many times that third party is the one responsible for the injury. So we've always had a steady stream of personal injury cases just coming in the door. What we decided to do in the last couple of years, and this was on the heels of building a building in the middle of Salt Lake County and raising our profile, at least from the outward looking to the public perspective, we felt like it was a great time and opportunity for us to let the rest of the community know what we've been doing for almost 2 decades.
Wow. I love that. Coming out of the shadows. Well, not really though, because you've already had the steady stream.
Mm-hmm.
So to be clear, did you go and become a police officer after you became a lawyer?
Correct.
And did you do that just because you wanted to better know who you were serving?
100%. So I was at the time working as a private attorney, but really as it relates to what are called Section 1983 civil rights lawsuits. So these are lawsuits where perhaps the next of kin is suing a police department and the involved officers on the heels of a tragic event like a shooting. And we would represent the police officers in the course of that. And so what became important to me over time was to really have the database of knowledge that I needed to do the best possible job I could do as not only their attorney, but general counsel for the Utah Fraternal Order of Police. And so that led me down a rabbit hole, and that ended with me going to police academy. I was running around the track at 37 years old with a bunch of 21-year-olds. And
was this when you got jacked? Was that was this when it was like, okay?
I would say thank you. And yes, one of the times I got in shape was at police academy. I could stand to run some more laps, to be honest with you. But yeah, it was definitely a difficult thing to do in my late 30s. As I said, these were primarily younger people, 21, 22 years old, and I had to show up and learn how to run and fight and shoot and everything else alongside of them. But it was the absolute honor of a lifetime and call it a side hustle, but a career that lasted almost 12 and a half years.
Yeah. Man, I love that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Where do you now go to? You said that you have to know what are the latest trends in personal injury? What are things coming up, specifically like in law enforcement? Where do you go to find your knowledge?
So thankfully, there is a continuing education requirement that sort of force feeds you some of that information. However, you have to have a healthy interest. And even though I'm by no means a technologist, and in fact, I have much more capable people in the firm for those purposes, I am interested, and I do read a lot. I'm interested in current events. You would have to live under a rock to not understand that artificial intelligence is changing the world. And I've used it in my own practice. You mentioned earlier that we're not billing hourly. Clients never pay out of pocket up front cash for legal services. It's a contingency fee. So it comes out of the winnings. And that's the only way that personal injury attorneys generally get paid. And so you have to be efficient. You have to be effective in what you're doing. And in 2025, if you're not implementing some aspect of AI in your practice, you're just missing the boat.
Yeah. How is AI software technology allowed to take things off the plate that are more transactional so you can care more?
That's a great question. I really view AI as the world's most amazing calculator. So if you think about how a calculator works, you think about, that mathematician. That mathematician still had to go to college for years and years, maybe graduate school. They had to learn algorithms. They had to understand the application of math to the real world. And so a mathematician with a calculator in his hand or her hand is a very different person than me with a calculator in my hand. I'm an attorney because I can't do math. And so the reality is you have to have that training and experience to understand how to use that tool in a way that's effective. Likewise, as an attorney, I have training. I have many years of education, whether it's my law degree or graduate school. and the many things that I've done as an attorney over the years that inform the types of questions that I ask artificial intelligence. The other thing is AI isn't perfect. And every once in a while, you ask a question, you get an answer, and because of your training, you're able to discern that might not be right.
Yeah.
And you need to always check on the robots because the robots will lead you astray every once in a while.
Yeah. If Terminator's taught us anything. I like that. It's AI's is only good as the one using it.
Correct.
Is what I'm hearing. And one thing I love, and especially for your firm who's leading with empathy, AI will never replace that.
Right.
Even if they could somehow code it, you would feel it.
I hope not, or I'm out of a job.
But man, I mean, with your empathy and with AI and efficiency, sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit.
Well, amazing. I gotta ask, would you say when you did start putting up those billboards, was there a big influx of leads?
You know, billboards are interesting, and you folks are all marketing people, so you understand how this works. You're paying for impressions. Every single person that drives by a billboard, you know, somehow through the magic of how all that works, you're credited as paying for every person, whether they're looking at the billboard or not.
Mm-hmm.
And your hope is that they do. To be honest with you, it was a greater success than I imagined. I knew that it was a subtle, maybe afterthought that you're trying to plant, that seed in the mind of the people that are injured and looking for a personal injury attorney online. You want them at least subconsciously aware that, oh, there's this firm called Nelson Jones. Those look like real lawyers. You know, when they're clicking through online, they may not overtly make the connection, but subtly they may. And we were very pleasantly surprised that those things, in fact, lined up.
Do some people call direct from billboard, or is it usually they'll see the billboard and then when they see on Google, they'll say?
I have been shocked about how many people call directly from the billboard, but by and large, it's really the former, not the latter. They're really looking online, and they may not even recall that they saw the billboard, which makes measuring the success.
You're inceptioning them. Kind of.
A little bit.
It's a little inception.
I know exactly what you mean, and a little bit. You're planting that seed in the subconscious so that when they are really asking the questions that they want to know the answers to, i.e., I've been injured in an accident, I need to find a personal injury attorney in the state of Utah, and here is a list of 4 or 5 or 10. Well, I like the look of these guys. I like something about Nelson Jones.
He's been through police training.
I doubt they know that. And if they do, you know, they've really been doing the research. But we've been very happy with the billboards.
Yeah. Have the junk calls shot through the roof, though, too? Or?
Some of that. Yeah. We do get the occasional call for, you know, a subscription to something that needs to be turned off.
Your car's extended warranty?
Yeah, some of those. And so that's part of the game, though. You have to weed through all of that to find the fruit, you know, out there. So
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, what advice would you give to other personal injury lawyers, especially those maybe starting out with smaller firms? What would you say to them? Don't
give up. I mean, the biggest thing, and this is just life advice, perseverance is the name of the game. If, you know, certainly you want to reevaluate if things are not working out early to make the changes you need to drive yourself towards success. But too many young lawyers or people inexperienced with business pull the plug early. And I feel like if you just can stick to it just one more year, dig in, find out where you need to grow, and put the pressure where many, many people are in the wings, ready, willing, and able to help you. Find those people and take it to the next level.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Now we're going to move to a segment sponsored by Totino's Pizza Rolls. Just kidding, but that would be awesome if you sponsored us and our office got unlimited pizza rolls. Mm-hmm. We're going to move on to a segment called Plead the Fifth. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you get 3 plead the fifths.
Well, on the advice of counsel, I've been told I don't have to answer any of your questions. So
it depends.
Okay, it depends on who the judge is. Okay, all right.
Allegedly,
who's the judge? All right, I'll play your game.
You're already lawyering out of this.
I'll play your game. Let's do this. Okay, fantastic.
So when you plead the fifth, you can raise that up.
Okay.
Okay, let's start off.
Wait, I have a question for you.
Oh my gosh.
What is the fifth?
Uh,
It's okay. There are, there are people in the room that know the answer to that question.
Chad, do you know? Ryan knows.
Yeah, it's the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. It's the right not to incriminate yourself.
That's what I was going to say.
Of course you were.
stole the words right out of my mouth.
Let's do this.
Which law school do you think is overrated?
Oh, you're going to get me in so much trouble. So much trouble.
I mean, you could use one of your plead the fifth.
I could, man. I have such a strong opinion about that. Let's just say it is a school near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to name it. I'm going to answer your question, and I'm not going to call this pleading the fifth because I'm going to give you enough information to divine this for yourself.
Okay, please.
But there is a certain school that should be enough for you.
Okay.
That I think could use a dose of the golden rule, because I've found that some of their attorneys forgot the golden rule when they left. So
okay.
I'm just going to put it right there.
We'll call that answered.
Okay.
I like it. Okay. Let's see if we started off light or strong. Okay. Have you ever had to drop a client, and why?
Every attorney has had to drop a client.
Okay.
And the reason is anytime there's any sort of situation where, for whatever reason, a client loses confidence, even from a perceived issue, whether it be communications or a personality issue, if you haven't had to drop a client, then you haven't been practicing long enough to experience that. There are a host of reasons that can cause that. Conflict is the easiest way to think about it, but sometimes that's a personal conflict or an ethical conflict. You need to really be aware of those ethical rules so that you know when it's appropriate to drop a client.
I like that. That's a good answer. Dang. Okay. Have you ever found out a client is faking an injury?
I have never had a client that I knew to have faked an injury. However, on the other side of the court, where I have been in the defense posture, defending an organization against a client, a party who was asserting that they were injured, we did prove that that person was faking that injury.
Oh man!
And we were able to get the outcome that we needed in that trial because that person was faking their injury. And we could show the video in court as to why we knew that to be true.
Okay. Nelson Jones is going to come after you if you're faking an injury. If you're faking it, they'll know. Brett will know.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the most overused argument you hear in your area of law?
Most overused argument. Oof. There are so many. But with personal injury, oftentimes you're dealing with insurance companies, and it's overused. It's as overused as it is sad, which is whenever an insurance company would try to assert that for whatever reason their policy does not apply to that person, when maybe in fact it does. And it just causes some turmoil for the client, some extra work for the attorney, and a round of litigation that would have otherwise been unnecessary if they would have just been upfront with the impact or the importance of adhering to the contract as it's written.
Okay, dang, he's lawyering his way out of these. I have to get a plead the fifth, so I'm gonna turn up the heat.
All right, go ahead, do what you got to do.
Okay, there's a lot of other billboards on I-15 in Utah of personal injury law firms.
Yeah.
Who do you like the least, and who's a law firm that no one should ever go to that is well known in Utah?
I am certainly going to plead the fifth on that one.
I had to get one, and I had to make that as ironclad as I could.
Yeah.
Okay. What's a legal trend you think is completely ridiculous?
A legal trend?
Yeah.
Ooh, again, we've spoken a lot about the advent of technology and the usefulness of technology. I would be very concerned if attorneys were supplanting technology for their own involvement in interpersonal communications. You still need to pick up the phone and talk to people. And even though I have to tell my kids sometimes, hey, don't text me, I'm in the other room, it's important to get face-to-face with people. And so to the extent that technology could be used to avoid interpersonal contact with a person, with a client. I think that would be a mistake.
I love that. So finding the balance between technology taking care of a lot of it for you, but also never losing that personal touch.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, that was the plead the fifth. Like I said, I had to give you one hard one. Dang, we got to turn these up for lawyers. I didn't even think about that. Well, that's awesome. Let's do one more segment. Alex here is going to show you a clip of a car accident.
Oh boy.
And we're going to ask you.
Take a test.
This segment is called Who's Liable?
Oh boy.
We'll show you a clip of a car accident, and we want to know who's liable.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. That is a difficult case, and I'll tell you why.
And one thing I like about this, I guess it's not law enforcement, but it is an ambulance.
Yeah.
So you've got some experience in this area a little bit, I'd imagine.
I have some experience in that area as a personal injury attorney, but also as a police officer. And so I have a lot of questions about the scene we just watched because, first of all, typically when you're making a left turn, and it appears to me that the vehicle involved in the accident, the passenger car, may have been in the process of turning left. I couldn't see if the blinker was on, but almost invariably, if you're making a left-hand turn and there's an accident, it's probably your fault. However, you have an emergency vehicle coming through the intersection. If you notice, the emergency vehicle, as it approaches the intersection, is changing the tone of their siren, and that's by training. You're supposed to actually change the tone of your siren as you're approaching an intersection because people will hear the siren, but it's hard to sort of focus on where that sound's coming from if it's consistent. You need a change in order for people to go, oh, what was that? And then they look. What happened in this instance is that the ambulance, it turned it off. It turned the siren off. So it went from a consistent sound of siren noise to there's an interval there where it's almost a full second where it turns the siren off as it's entering that intersection. It's possible that the person that struck the ambulance wasn't even aware that they were going to face an emergency vehicle in the intersection.
Wow. So. Dang. Okay, that's actually more in depth than I thought it was going to be.
Sure.
So who's liable in this situation? I mean, there's still more questions maybe.
There are questions.
Who are you leaning towards?
To be honest with you, in that particular instance, I would like to represent the third-party civilian, not the EMTs.
Okay, that is not where I thought that was going. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, this has been a Who's Liable.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome.
My pleasure.